Welcome to Power of the Tribe podcast. This is your host, John Connors. I'm also the founder and head instructor of Connors Martial Arts. We're located right here in Norwood, Massachusetts. If you want to learn about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai kickboxing, or mixed martial arts, just reach out to me. Give me a call, send me a message. Come on in, actually, is the best thing you should do. And it'll get you started on your path, your martial arts path. That journey will make your life better, transform you. You meet a lot of great people. You'll become part of our tribe. And life will be better. And I'm not here with my co-host, Dan Robin, today. He is on vacation. He's in the mountains. Dimitri, I think he's working on one of his patches. He's going to get a patch for so many mountains that he climbs. But instead, I have a special guest. He's been on before. He's my college roommate. His name is Mark Vignali. So Mark, Dimitri, I would say Mark is my spiritual advisor. One of my spiritual advisors. He's like my rabbi, my shaman, priest, pastor. And how you doing, Mark?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to talking to you, as always.
How did you like that introduction?
That was nice. That was kind of accurate. If I was Jewish, I'd be a rabbi, so I accept that totally. I just told the rabbi the other day that I'm spiritually Jewish, so but there's not the same type of path if you raise Catholic. Priest never appealed to me.
Right. Yeah.
There's not too many other roads for that. But yeah, if I was Jewish, I definitely would have been a rabbi. But that's another story. How you doing?
I'm
World
doing
champ.
Good. Thank you so much, buddy. Thank you for your help. You definitely helped me in preparing for it.
I was really proud of you. I was really. I did want to ask you how long did that last? The elation, because you sounded good, but then you have to get back to the daily grind. But you have another feather in the cap. That was probably a whole process of recalibration in its own right, huh?
I think you're right. Yeah, I did feel elated. I felt very good. You're walking down the street and you say to yourself, "Oh wow, I'm the Masters World Champion," and you do feel good. Your chest puffs out a little bit. I went over and I trained some Muay Thai with Kru Mark Dellagrotte, and I know Mark,
Yeah.
you met Kru, and
yeah, good guy.
yeah, he's the greatest. And and we did a session, and he's like, "You've never been better." He said, "You got that world champ energy. Holy shit!" And there's something
That's
to that.
funny.
It like a little bit of hesitancy kind of falls away because you're feeling so good, and you just get into the flow faster and you feel better. So yeah, I definitely had. Mm-hmm.
Well, no, I was going to say it's interesting where the traps could come in too. As I'm thinking, because it's all good, but there's a lot of validation. So much your process worked, the training worked. So one could start to think that everything's working when you still have to keep improving, like you say, So I could see just how you're describing it, where an ego trap could start building quickly if you think things are just working,
Yeah.
But in some ways they are. It's like, yeah, you could stay on the pace, and then okay, but where do you have to prove? That takes a whole other.
Mark, that's so interesting. Yeah, because as the audience might not know, you've been an athlete for your whole life and a competitor, a very successful competitor. Dimitri, Mark was the Harvard football team's tailback, all Ivy football player, so he competed at a very high level with a lot of success. So it does feel good, but then I pretty quickly started feeling not so good. So, Mark, maybe you can relate to this. It's, before you achieve the goal, I had this as a long-term goal. I was going to be Masters World Champion, and I set up the process. So every day I'd wake up, what's going to take me a little bit closer to that goal? And in my mind, I was going to keep competing until I was 100 years old, and they told me, you can't come here anymore. Just take this medal and leave. That was the ultimate plan. And then all of a sudden I get the goal. So what I started to do, Mark, was I started to sort of denigrate the whole goal. I started to think, oh, that really wasn't that big of a deal anyways. And it's only Master 6, a bunch of older guys. And what's the big deal? And isn't that funny?
Yeah, that is. It's almost part of your psychological process to sort of keep yourself in check somehow, maybe.
Have you ever experienced that? Like once you've climbed a certain mountain that you turn around and you start to say, yeah, it wasn't that much of a mountain anyways.
No, for me, it's just like I just really reinforce that it's over and it means nothing because it's over. That's sort of my self-process.
Yeah.
I think we all have one because you have to deal with that. I just like, that's over. Why am I even thinking about it anymore? Today's today, and I have this to do. So but it's sort of the same effect, some way of discarding it, so it doesn't affect you in the now, the past stuff.
It's like you walk through a threshold, through a doorway, and on one side it's a really big deal, and then when you walk through to the other side, it's not that big of a deal anymore. And what's next?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess it was a 200-yard game in football, and then
you had a 200-yard game in football.
Huh?
You rushed for 200 yards once.
Yeah, I had a few, and
that's huge, man. Yeah.
And then maybe that's once you have a couple, then you start thinking like that. I remember the first one puffed me up, but it's just funny. The whole baggage comes with that, and then if you see yourself daydreaming about it in practice, you're off. Or someone's talking to you and you actually are listening, and they're like, "That was great, you were great," and then that after a while you realize, I just realized it's not helping me. None of this is helping the game. It's not helping me get better. It's not helping me. So that just was happened to be a decent game. Things just came together. Whatever.
Right.
That's definitely yesterday, and today's today. To me, it's just lately. We were talking about this last time. Is concentration, and that's a kind of an example of concentration. Trying to come back to the moment. Come back to. I still have to go to practice. I still have to go through my training, and that takes. Yeah, you know what I mean. A single-minded focus, which is hard to develop in itself, but it's essential.
Well, Mark, I don't know if I think I had this conversation with you. I might have told it to Dan on the podcast, but right before this last tournament, I started to think, you know what? I'm the number 2 seed in my bracket, and I think I'm realistic, objectively better than the number 1 seed. I probably should beat him. So I'm actually the favorite to win this thing. And here it is. Here's this goal I laid out in front of me. And it's right there for me to snatch up and take. But I felt like I didn't want to lean into that mindset of just like grabbing it. I thought, I've been immersing myself in the process, and it's gotten me this far. And I got to keep that mindset of process and then see what the results are.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's the only way to do things successfully. Because just like that quote you sent me from the Bhagavad Gita, you're really not entitled to rewards or the fruit of your labor. That's just, if that happens, it happens, but it doesn't mean anything per se. Like snatching the gold medals, like, yeah. You're mine, my precious. You know what I mean? That's the whole lesson of Gollum, right? My precious, and it's not about that. It wasn't about the medal at all, really. That was just a kind of what's it called, validation that your process is working, that stuff was working. If you get caught too much up in that goal, then you get that, what do you do next? And then there's a whole depression that can come with that. But if it is like you're saying about the process, the daily routine, and really honoring that and getting into that, then you could take that the rest of your life. And that's kind of the Zen secret. We were talking about that. That that in the momentness is really about enjoying the process, being immersed in the process of living, per se. Whatever you're doing, be doing it at the utmost at that moment as best you can.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Yeah,
that's this idea of process is something that's bigger than me. So, even if it's just a process of becoming a Masters World Champion, like here's how you train, here's what you do, here's how you eat, here's whatever the mental preparation you do, here's the process, and that process in a way is eternal. You know what I mean? So that process can have started before me, and then I could leave this world, and other people could be doing it. So it's like you have a foot in the eternal when you're immersed in the process, and when you're not, when you're here, when you're just trying to snatch something up like that, that's too much in the material world almost. I don't know if that makes sense.
Right. You're getting caught up in the details, and as they say, not seeing the forest for the trees or whatever. But that brings me back to what we were talking about the Lao Tzu and the way, how we like that idea. God for them wasn't a personification. It was a concept more akin to the way of things. And you want to fall in line with the way of things. And when you're with the way of the universe, then you are in harmony. And when you're feel disharmony and dissonance, and then you have to scramble to get back in with the way. But that's, to me, that's pure process. This universe is unfolding every minute, every second, right? Every microsecond. Things are constantly in flux and change. There's a process to it all. When we're in harmony with that.
Yeah, when we're in harmony, then we get the best results that are able to be had.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I think about that human nature is sort of the way, right? You ever feel frustrated with people and you're like, why is that guy doing that? And why do people always do this? And why do people always do that? I find whenever I get into that mode of thinking, all it does is give me frustration. It's like saying, why are humans human? Why do humans correspond to their nature? And when I can
really help, right?
It doesn't help at all.
Yeah.
And when I can just accept human nature and just say this is the way people are, without even judging it, without saying this is the way we are and we're awful, just like, well, this is the way we are, and how am I going to operate in this? Then I'm operating in the way. I think when I can do that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot easier said than done, obviously, but that's the mindset. And again, that comes with self-talk. You have to people piss you off. Yesterday was funny with my in-law. He's got some anger issues. I love him to death. He's like, don't you just wish you had a gun sometimes when you're on the road and just shoot out the fucking tires when he's doing crosses? I'm like, no, Gramps, I don't feel like that. I never feel like pulling the gun out. He said, but my buddy does. He wishes he had a tank and he could roll over top of him. I'm like, no. If I had a gun, I'd keep it at home locked up. A, I wouldn't have it in the car. B, if I had a tank, something, you know what I mean? I'd have to be dodging helicopters chasing me down. I'm like, but he was saying.
That is a weird thing about how so many of us do have those feelings of anger, frustration, and aggression on the road from small things, right?
Oh, yeah. And he would live that out in his mind, picturing yourself with your gun, getting out of your car, aiming at the tires, maybe going, blasting his tires.
That's probably not healthy, right?
Yeah, I can. Your heart rate has to shoot up a little past normal at that point, right?
Right.
I mean, you're just juicing yourself with more cortisol or whatever.
Right.
And no, it's not healthy. That you have to talk yourself down from stuff like that,
And you're sort of reinforcing those neurological connections of violent anger, I bet, too. So it's probably not
exactly
something to be in the habit
pattern. That's how you're reacting. It's just playing out in your imagination. I was like, well, I remember doing that when I was 15, 16 grams, maybe 20, maybe a couple times. I picture kicking some ass, but you got to let that go at some point because it's just not healthy. And then at some point you have to say, this is delusional. Too, right? I'm wasting time thinking about blowing this guy's tires out. I could have made that red light. So
it's crazy. Yeah.
It comes back to concentration. You have to, I was re-looking at Buddha's the Eightfold Path, and one of them is observation. He doesn't call it that. I can't remember the name. I think it's right mindfulness, but it's basically you have to be observing yourself in life as a practice. That's one of the eight limbs of his plan, and emotions, mental game, physical game, how you react to people. And that's how you can let stuff go. When you develop that detachment, it's very powerful. And we were talking about Jewishness. I've been reading the mystical Jewish guys, the Kabbalists, and they're all about Stoicism, which is a detachment. That comes from observing yourself, so you can observe the ups and downs and not be reacting to them. It's a hard practice, but it is a practice, and it's an essential one, really, where you do end up getting just reacting all the time, to the external stuff.
So you're supposed to sort of observe when you tend to maybe lose your composure, when you tend to get too frustrated maybe or something. Like what are the conditions of that? Yeah.
What is that feeling like? Wow, my heart rate's up. Oh my God, why am I having these thoughts of blowing out this guy's tires? Why do I wish I had a gun right now? I mean, you start to question this thinking you're getting, these feelings, as a way to let them go, let them pass, because they just want to pass.
Mm.
And they become signals for whatever reason to you, but nothing to act on, to react to necessarily. And that's ultimately a lot of strength there. You save your energy for what's really
Right.
important.
I have noticed that people, we all individually have different nervous systems, and we get excited and nervous and frustrated or angry about different things. We're not all exactly the same in that regard. And like I mentioned many times on this podcast, my son is an excellent competitor. He keeps his composure all the time, and I have to work harder for that. But
Yeah, me too.
I've made big gains just in the last 18 months working on that. But I did notice that I need a certain amount of excitement in order to make something interesting. I need to be a little bit nervous or a lot nervous. Does that make sense? It's like if
no, you have to make it more appealing to yourself somehow by getting juiced about something. Yeah.
Well, if there's no fear, then what's the point of it, right?
Right. Yeah, no, that's who you are. That's good to know.
And I was
I
thinking
feel the
that
same thing.
this idea of process, if I combine a compelling goal, and it's compelling because it's a little bit unknown, I don't know if I can do it, and it's a little bit scary, a little bit exciting, a little bit anxiety provoking, and then I immerse myself in the process, and that immersion of the process has like a calming effect. You know what I mean? It sort of like mitigates that other stuff. And then I get to have one foot in the world of the known and the knowable, and one foot in the unknowable and the exciting and the scary. You know what I mean? I think it's our human nature. We want to have a little bit of both. You don't want to have everything completely known and boring, but you don't want everything completely unpredictable all the time either, right?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Yeah, I think that's how we grow, right? Just doing new experiences and learning from these new experiences. But you don't want it to be too new that you can't handle it, or too unknown that you're just out of your depth. But no, that's a great point. I think we need a little bit of excitement, and how to do that within the parameters of sanity and health. I guess that's a trick for a lot of people. I mean, that's why martial arts are great. Every day you go in there, you're doing something challenging, and it's intense. But no, it's a great point. You're braver than me with that. Like, you like to. I get nervous about certain things, and I like to. I don't mind being on stage, things like that. Like when I would perform, I kind of like that, but I had to be seriously prepared. So I guess I had to have some sort of control of the outcome, I guess. But
well, that's interesting, right? Because you had said earlier, you quoted how do I say that? Bhagavad Gita.
Bhagavad Gita, yeah.
Bhagavad Gita. Okay.
I think it's Bhagvad.
VAD.
Bhagavad
Gita. Okay, so you're not entitled to the fruits of your
labor.
Your labor. You're just entitled.
Just do the labor for the labor's sake, right?
Right.
And just do it as best you can. And there's inherent enlightenment in that.
But I notice when people are competing, or like you said, when you're going on the stage, for some of us, if we don't feel like we've prepared properly, we tend to underperform. Like we feel like we don't deserve to win, so to speak. You know what I mean? We don't deserve to have a good outcome.
True.
But if we can really prepare well, then we can. That we'll like allow ourselves to get the victory or the good outcome because we earned it. We prepared right. Which sounds like where you were coming from a little bit. When you go on stage, you prepare so well that.
Yeah, I'd probably be able to push the limits more too, right? I mean, I think that's when people say they fall into the zone, as an athlete, that's because they're prepared so well, they were able to not even think about the game. You know what I mean? They were just purely in the moment, so concentrated in the moment of what was happening in the game that they were able to reach a really high state consciousness that turned into the zone, where you went into a delta wave or theta wave, whatever they call it, high alpha wave state. It's I'm guessing, I think it's because they practiced so hard, prepared so hard mentally, and then actually in the game, they didn't even have to think,
Right.
And they were able to just go beyond thought. And that's my theory. I think that's, if you're not as mentally prepared, there's probably a lot more frustration happens to you, where you get emotional and those things trip you up. You feel that, shit, I'm not as good as I could be. I'm not as polished. Like, even if it's unconscious, you're noticing.
And that causes distraction, which gets back to what you were talking about before about concentration or
and
one-pointed focus.
Right. And self-consciousness, which is a real killer of a lot of stuff. Once you become self-conscious in the moment, you lose it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what happens sometimes if you're not prepared. You just like, shit, you just start thinking about how you feel in that moment, and then you crumble.
That's so. I don't know why this image popped in my head, Mark, but there was a guy who was from the Wallenda family, the Flying Wallendas. They would walk on tight ropes. You ever hear of those people? They've been doing it for decades, I guess. But there's one guy now who's probably like 40 years old, who's one of the surviving members of this family. And I remember a few years ago he did this thing where he tightrope walked across the Grand Canyon, like some section of it. So I think it was maybe 1,000 feet across and like several thousand feet high. And he's got no safety harness on. He's got a long pole for balance, and he's got his little slippers on, and he's walking across this thing. And he had, I think it was his father-in-law in his earpiece, like telling him, giving him different information. Like if there were wind gusts, sometimes it got a little windy, so he had to stop and squat and crouch down for 10 or 20 seconds and then get back up and go again. And then the father-in-law kept going, okay, you're doing good. You're doing good. Like he started like over coach and over talk. And the guy was so cool. He goes, okay, Dad, that's a little too much now. And he, like, as he was out there, 3,000 feet high, he's like, calm down in the coaching. Okay, I got this.
He had to tell the coach to calm down. That's hilarious.
And I totally felt it. I was
cool.
like,
that's another level of shit, right?
I was like, wish this guy would just shut up, for Pete's sakes. And you're not helping the guy. That guy's the expert. This guy in the earpiece really, I forget what he was saying. It was just foolish encouragement. But the guy had so much composure, he could.
Right.
He didn't say, shut up, Dad. He was like, I a little less input, Dad. Something like that.
Yeah.
That's very well
That's
done.
amazing. That's amazing. Well, that's pure observation, right? He was noticing that, Dad, you get me the fucking point where you're making my heart beat more than I want it to.
Yeah.
Right now. So,
he was a complete distraction. Complete distraction. Yeah.
You're a distraction, and I'm noticing it, Dad. So shut up.
And you got the sense that the father-in-law was like pushed himself into the production. Like he really wasn't a necessary piece. Like anybody could have been on that earpiece, or nobody probably would have been best for the guy. But
Yeah. No, and that's a funny lesson about life too. You never know what's going to happen. You have these unknowns that are going to come and slam you. That guy thought he had everything ready except his dad, over coaching and pushing the anxiety on his earpiece. He's like, okay, now I got to deal with this. It's like Kenny Florian has a great story where he was prepared for his fight, and he's elbowing the guy in the eye, and the guy's bleeding. But then when guy gets on top of him, the blood's dropping in Kenny's eye. And he's like, how can you prepare for that? All of a sudden, you thought you were ready for this fight, this guy's technique, this guy's whatever. You have your game plan, everything's working. All of a sudden, you're getting the guy's blood dripping in your eyes, and you're blinded. And now you got to deal with the blindfold. I mean, it's so martial arts, right?
Hard to practice that. Yeah. Yeah.
Now what do you do? Now how good are you? It's like life does that to you. Okay, once you think you're at one level, it'll throw something at you to just, okay, now check this level out. Are you ready for this level? It's amazing. So, yeah, that's why. And then you can go. I guess you can resort back to process. At that point, if you have your breathing right, you're not freaking out. Okay, I got to go back to the basics here.
Exactly. Go back to process. What's the next step in what I'm doing? Yeah, that's exactly what you want to do.
The funny thing about process just made me think is, I guess it triggered it, is what do you do when something spontaneous does fly into your process? That's you got to regroup. I guess like process. People think of process so systematic that it's rigid, but you don't want it to be rigid.
But here's
right?
the thing: it's process is always evolving, so you're always getting something new to come in, and then you just fold that back into the process. So you're like, okay, next time we're in the gym, we're going to practice blood coming to my eyes, and I got to figure it out. You would add that somehow into the training ritual. I mean, if it was something that was going to come up with a certain amount of regularity, you would just fold that back in. So then the competition becomes an exercise of discovery. Like, what is the next thing we're going to add to our process? We're going to fold back into our process. So then you're not dreading anything. You're open to whatever happens, because it's just going to help you develop and evolve your process, which is really what we're doing. And the competition is just, part of that ecology of growing your process and evolving your process. It's not the outcome itself. It's not the ultimate thing that we're trying to do.
Not to blow steam up your ass or anything, but that's unique about your process, by the way. From what I heard, a lot of people get locked into a process and they're rigid with it, but you're allowing for this option of let's fold the new information back into it, so it's always evolving. And I think that makes a big difference. You become more bamboo flowing with the wind than a rigid, concrete pillar that's going to erode over time. You're going to flow with things and be able to adapt. And that's, I think, what some people have trouble doing. And the process becomes a crutch instead of the thing that keeps flowing them forward. And it seems like almost a contradiction, but a paradox. But maybe that's why.
I think if you don't do it that way, you're bound to lose ground to other people who are doing it that way. New people are going to come in and they're going to innovate either out of ignorance or out of energy or youthfulness, and they're going to stumble upon methods and processes that are superior to yours, so you just kind of get left in the dust. And also sort of mitigate your feelings of frustration, because to think that you're not a work in progress is not the way to look at things. I'm not a work in process.
To think that you're not a work in progress? I'm sorry, what would you say exactly?
So if I think of myself as a work in progress, then when I make mistakes, I don't get overly consumed with it. I adjust the process. I don't have to beat myself up too much about it, because, who I am now is not static. This isn't entirely who I am. And for better or worse, I'm a work in progress. So, if I stop training jiu-jitsu, guess what? I'm not going to be as good of a jiu-jitsu player. So,
yeah,
we're
what you just said on back to this eightfold path of Buddha. That's one of the first one. That is the first one. It's right understanding, which I think is fascinating. That he starts his thing with perspective. Before you can even enter into a successful life, you have to have the right perspective, which is fascinating. So it's kind of what you said. You have to understand that things are impermanent. That's the basic. That's the simplified way of what his right understanding is. You have to understand the right perspective is to accept that everything changes. Impermanence is the only permanent thing about the universe. Is things change constantly. So accepting that allows you to not get deluded in that, things that create stasis, staticness, rigidity, the delusion that you can be young forever, or that you can be great forever, or that this will work forever, or that, just things change. And accepting that, accepting that as a fundamental part of your thought perspective really helps with a lot of stuff.
Definitely. Helps with relationships. We think we're going to be married forever, but we might not. Everything changes, and the nature of relationships
Everything changes. Yeah, we're all going to die. We don't like to talk about it, but we all are going to pass on. We're all going to get sick at some point. Someone is going to get hurt around us. Whatever. The job will change. The weather changes.
Mark, did you happen to watch that? Mark, did you happen to watch the movie The Irishman? Scorsese.
I haven't seen that yet. No.
So what's cool about that is at the end of the movie, it actually becomes a meditation on death, I think, and dying, not just death, on dying. So you get these characters, Joe Pesci and Deniro, who are, you could describe them as powerful mobsters or gangsters or whatever, and then they start becoming old and enfeebled, and it's
Noticeably so, huh?
oh my gosh, yeah, yeah, and yeah, they become just wheelchair bound and
Oh
completely
wow.
harmless. So they go from being these really physically dangerous people. I don't think this is a spoiler alert for anybody. I think you could still enjoy it. Um, to becoming completely enfeebled, and that's essentially the path that we're all on. And as martial artists,
Mhm.
it's more acute, or as gangsters like those guys are, because a great part of their identity and their defining characteristics is that if you're not careful, they might bash your head in or something, or kill you.
Right.
And then they head to this point where they couldn't do that if they wanted to. Um, so talk about everything changes. Very and I think as martial artists, we're often thinking about strengthening ourselves and making ourselves more powerful, or even more dangerous. You could think in a way, and the reality is that's completely impermanent.
It's a delusion. That's what the Hindis would call that, a delusion, right? When you start thinking that way, you're delusional, because the reality is just the opposite. You have to factor in that perspective of impermanence, or you're just delusional. That's the best way to put it.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you have to accept that you're delusional. If it's like with people with the Botox these days and all that. I'm like, come on, how can we not just be laughing at that and saying, why are you trying to fight off this age? And appreciate old age for what it brings, which is wisdom. Um,
But
so
don't you think, Mark, people don't like old age? They don't. I think people don't like old people because they look at old people and they get kind of repulsed by them, and they're like, ugh. And I think
it's
they
just
don't.
an aesthetic, right? It's not a
Well,
pleasing aesthetic. Yeah,
it's not a pleasing
and it
aesthetic.
means
I think it's pushing an
you.
unconscious buttons of like, this is where you're heading, and we're all mortal. So
Yeah, I think you're right there. You're right, exactly. It's you people project. You start projecting, and it doesn't feel good. You want to avoid that.
right. It doesn't feel good. Like you see
And,
somebody and they got some loose skin hanging under their neck, and it's like they're wearing like a necklace of death. It's like, oh yeah, we're all dying. That's right. You
yeah,
just
and the hair is
reminded me of
wafting in
that
the wind.
fact.
And
Yeah,
no, yeah, it's funny when we don't have a culture that honors that at all. So we're getting the opposite messages: the youthfulness, the exuberance, the excitement. That's the message we're bombarded with. That's where it's at. And then when you see an old person, you almost think like, oh shit, they're just out of the game. I
do
don't
you
even want
think
to
there
look
are
at them.
cultures that do honor that?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Yeah, like
I noticed it in India. The families were together. You see old people walking around all the time holding hands with kids. You don't see that as much in America. You see it more over, especially in Asia. They just honor the elders. It's part of their traditions, part of their culture. And I was telling you about the Native Americans. They had the elder tent, where the elders were there all day hanging out with each other, and then the youth would go in and go in there for advice. The younger people were the chiefs, the 30 and 40-year-olds, but they always consulted the elders. They always understood that these people have been through it. They have some answers. Let's consult them before we make a decision. Let's ask 20 elders what they think, what they've seen, because you can pretty much use the wisdom of the crowd that way, come up with a better solution for problems if you consult elders, because they've seen so many ups and downs. But we don't do that at all. I have this dream of creating a documentary where we go into old folks' homes and try to preserve some of the stories and wisdom of the people. It's like what's it called? It's a unutilized asset. I mean, that's when you've lived a life, some stuff. I tell you, I thought in my 40s I knew some things, but things didn't solidify till after 50. In the Roman culture, you couldn't be a general until you were 50, and you couldn't run for the Senate until you were 50. And the Kabbalist, you can't get involved in the mystical secrets of the religion until you're 40. So you have to have lived a certain life. These other cultures have acknowledged that you need to have lived this X amount of years before you know anything at all.
Well,
this
I'll tell
idea
you,
that some
I feel
20 or
like in the
30-year-olds can be telling people what to do is crazy.
I think in the last few years, I've learned some really important things about life and the nature of the universe that I didn't know before. So I totally agree with that. And then I laugh at myself. I'm like, it took me to age, 50 something to figure this out. The hell was I doing?
Well, it's funny. I even laughed. If someone would have told me what I'm saying right now, if I would have heard some 56-year-old man tell me what I'm saying right now, I probably would have discarded it at 20, 30, even 40. My ego was probably so big or into whatever I was doing. I thought, I can figure that out. What are you talking about? I'm pretty smart, or whatever. And you just don't get it because experience is what teaches, not your intellect,
But you do see the shadow side of that sometimes, where you see these old entertainers. Jerry Lewis is the guy that pops into my mind, and they're like, yeah, these people today, they're not as funny as I was, and they seem almost bitter that their time has passed. You know what I mean?
That's true. Well, I think that's a great point, but I think we're an ego-driven culture. We're in these little bubbles, whereas these cultures I'm talking about, and they're not perfect. I'm not saying they're perfect, but they have a tradition of trying to have self-growth your whole life. So you're an old person, but you've been working on yourself your whole life. You as part of your culture.
Right.
The natives, they had ceremonies for every point in their life. They had different rituals to develop self-awareness, develop self-knowledge at every step of the way. So do the Hindus. If you're really religious, if you're following the texts, you're actually, you are meditating. You are going out and doing retreats. You are fasting. You are looking within as a practice. So that's part of their culture. We don't have that necessarily. It's hit and miss in our culture, from what I see, whether someone's working on themselves or not, consciously, deliberately working on themselves to improve themselves, admitting their faults, correcting their faults, going in meditation, observing, oh my God, I shouldn't have acted like that. My wife, her meditation is at the end of the day, she thinks through her whole day and she tries to self-correct in her imagination what she wishes she would have done, right? Just so the next day she'll be better. That's an ancient practice, actually. And she told me she did that. I said, wow, I've read about that. She said, yeah, I just came up with that myself. But not everybody does stuff like that.
That's interesting.
If you did that, Jerry Lewis wouldn't be saying those stupid things, right?
I try to do that with my jiu-jitsu, Mark. So, I was just rolling with one of our top students, Anthony Twining. He's a great guy. He's got amazing jiu-jitsu. And I forget what happened, what he did, passed my guard or something. And fortunately, he's a nice enough guy, and I'm the head of the academy. I could say, wait a minute, what happened? How did you get over on me? What should I do next time to do so to make it harder? And then we'll back it up and we'll go over what happened and we'll kind of troubleshoot it. So it's something that you should be doing in your jiu-jitsu, and you get great results from it. I think if you're not doing that, I don't know how you get improvements or how you get good results if you're not doing that type of thing.
Yeah.
And but to do it in your greater life is even more beneficial. Not just jiu-jitsu. I mean, that's like a little hobby, a martial art. But yeah, if you're doing it in your life, it would be probably pretty huge.
Well, that's what the modern educationalists discovered. That reflection, like when I worked at public schools, I worked at private schools, I've worked at Waldorf schools, worked at a lot of different schools with different methods, right? Different teaching and training methods. All the successful modern methods of teaching incorporate reflections. You always have your students after a test, after an exercise, after a lesson, you have them write. They discovered that's how you learn. You have to do something, then reflect on it, self-correct, and move on. You have to reflect, and that's and that brings us back to Buddha. That's the eighth thing. You have to meditate. So when you sit and reflect, then you can process things and see. And reflection becomes a practice. It can't just be. I told you this story. I don't know if I told you. I lived with this guy in an apartment building in New York, and he was a really cool graffiti artist, and he was also a bicyclist. And and he moved to Manhattan. He'd lived in Brooklyn all his life, real tough neighborhood. I'm like, wow, what made you move here? He said, I got shot, man. I said, really? He goes, yeah. He said, yeah, I had this nice jacket. I was making some money. I had this great jacket, and these guys jumped me, tried to steal my jacket, and I tried to fight back. They just pulled out a gun and shot me. And I woke up in the hospital. I was in the hospital for weeks, and I'm just laying there in bed going, I got to get out of this neighborhood. He said straight. That was just it. It popped in, and I never thought about leaving my neighborhood. I get this clear thought, and then he looked at me and said, pain will make you reason. That's just one of the best quotes I've ever heard in my life. Pain will make you reason. And it forced him to reflect.
Yeah.
He was forced by a gunshot to lay in bed long enough to go within and reflect on his life and just, boom, I need to get out of here. And if you don't reflect, the universe has a way of making you reflect.
Yeah,
and
pain
don't grow otherwise.
Pain is just important information. I think in our culture we're looking to avoid pain all the time, but the reality is it's important information that helps us change things up and go in a different direction. So basically what you're saying is the whole thing about process. You go out and you try something, you get a result, fine. If you get the result you're looking for, you stay with your process. You get a result that you didn't want, now we got to fold something back into our process. So it's exactly what we're talking about. And I'm trying to apply this to all parts of my life. If I think of everything as a process, whether it's growing my business, doing my jiu-jitsu, my relationships with people, I think it's a really effective model in order to live a good life.
Yeah, I think so. And you have to factor in the reflection as part of the process. You have to do stuff and then look back, not dwell in it like we talked about last time, not too much, but reflect enough to assess.
To get the information about what are we going to try differently this time or next time.
You have to honestly assess. Yeah, exactly.
And you may come up with something that's the wrong answer, but that's okay. You know what I mean? So I'll say, okay, next time I'm going to keep my chin down or something. And then you go into the same situation and you keep your chin down and it doesn't work. I go, okay, that didn't work.
Right, so you'll find it. Right.
What are we going to do next time? Yeah.
But you have to assess. Yeah, you have to reflect and then make a decision. And you have to do it honestly. And as we've talked about this before, yes, they blame the other guy. They find these other things. A lot of people have trouble just admitting, okay, maybe I messed up,
Right.
And
the only thing that matters is what you've messed up anyways, right? You know what I mean? Yeah, if I'm blaming the other guy, then it's sort of like I was talking about earlier, then I'm blaming human nature, which isn't going to change anytime soon. I mean, it might change gradually over time, but it's not going to affect my life. Yeah, if I get mad about human nature, it's just wasted energy.
It is, and you can't control that, So, like you talk about, you got to figure out quickly what can I control, and then work on those things. I can't control the other guy, It's like that's why they say drive defensively.
Right. And I don't need to come up with all the answers right away. That's what my life is for, right? Is to work my process, develop my process, and keep doing it until I'm the guy in the old age home in the wheelchair, right?
Yeah. I like how you put that. You can't come. Yeah, you're not going to come up with all the answers. I was talking about these mystical guys. I mean, that's one of the big lessons is when you've moved on to a higher state in your initiation of the spiritual path, when you understand that you know nothing. That you really don't know that much, and you accept that I'm not going to have all the answers. There's not like this bingo light comes on, I'm enlightened. That's a myth. We don't know that much.
Mark, I always suspected that. I used to talk to this one person who was really into that concept of spontaneous enlightenment, where they were going to meditate one day and all of a sudden, boom, some switch was going to flip and they would become enlightened. And it's just, it seems like almost an American idea, like, I'm going to get a huge benefit with very little effort. That's what it seemed to me. Like the idea that it was easy was really the appeal.
Yeah. Like people think they can sit and meditate and they're going to become enlightened. you're always fighting your patterns, your conditioning. That's a lot of things, a concept that some people you want to get, that you're conditioned to respond to the world ever since you were 1, 2, 3, 4 years old. Your life is basically a series of patterns, pattern emotionally, pattern in thinking, pattern in reacting, and you want to do this self-observation, figure out how you've been conditioned, and try to recondition yourself. Have a good process, like you're saying. And the other thing is that these higher orders of Hinduism and even the rabbinical, they say that enlightenment isn't up to you; it's up to the universe. It's a grace. It's graced to you when you least expect it, and it's mysterious who it's bestowed upon.
What does it even mean,
really
Mark? Enlightenment. What does that even mean?
Enlightenment?
Yeah.
I think it means living 24/7 with the harmony of the way. Coming back to that term, you're now in harmony. You're living according to the laws of the universe. That's it. You're just pure action. You're purely in line with the fundamental way of the universe, and that's the best way to put it. And all your actions are in tune with how they should be, and with people. And I think it looks ethical. I think it feels joyful most of the time. But yet when you're sad, you're purely feeling the sadness, but you don't dwell and hold on. It's, you think of this world, this life, you're not sitting there dreaming of big houses and big cars and trying to stay young and all that stuff. You're not attached to anything. You understand that things come and go, and you're okay with that. You find equanimity is part of it, where the ups and the downs don't throw you off either one. You go through ups and downs, through happiness and sadness, understanding these too shall pass. So, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to describe, but that's kind of how I see it. And harmony is the best way to look at it, I think.
I definitely have to work on my equanimity.
I hear you. Yeah, I have tizzy. I just get into tizzy about little shit. I try to That's the breathing is that's the most underrated thing in the world is breathing.
Well, as you know, I've told you I do Wim Hof breathing for 20 minutes every day. But here's the reality is I sometimes skip days. But what I find is if I end up skipping 4 or 5 days, I start losing my equanimity and the losses of life, whatever as small as they might be, start to get under my skin and bother me, and I have more anxiety. So I gotta knuckle down and stay on track. That's the other thing happening, Mark. After the tournament, I was eating very healthy, controlling my consumption of alcohol, all these different things. So then after the tournament, I wanted to let my hair down and celebrate a little bit, and it's very unrewarding. It's like I don't know why. Yeah, I put on 5 fast pounds, and I don't feel great, and I want to get back to that more aesthetic lifestyle. It's actually just feels better.
Yeah, I think you discovered some. That's probably like an old patterning of how you want to enjoy victories, is going out and getting crazy with the champagne over the head. But it's like now you have a new level of health. It's like, oh, that doesn't even feel good to do that.
Doesn't, yeah. Definitely not.
But back to quickly about your breathing with the Wim Hof, the key is to do stuff like that every day, though. Have some sort of daily practice, whether it's breathing or walking, where you take your attention within, where you're calming your body, even if it's 20 minutes. And it has to be daily, though. Don't beat yourself up if you miss a day.
Right.
But that's the goal, is to have a daily practice. Then you can stay more in line, more in harmony, less reactive, more able to handle stuff. Things roll off your back a little more,
Definitely. And you're in the flow. I've found with the breathing, Mark, Wim Hof does a certain breathing. I don't do it exactly the way he does it. I found that for me to breathe optimally, I keep my body essentially completely relaxed. I find if I tense any muscle at all in my chest or back, it inhibits the breath a little bit. And I'm finding that the breath is a little bit like a bellows, something that would
Yeah,
stoke a
yeah, yeah,
furnace. So if you have a bellows, there's some optimal closing and opening in a certain
yes,
pace that's going to optimally move the air. Like if you slam it all the way open and slam it all the way closed, that doesn't move the air in the most optimal way. So,
right.
it's almost a metaphor for this whole flow and the Tao and the way and everything, where like you're
Yeah,
you're trying, but you're trying the right amount and in the right way.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you can't have any stress or anything to it at all. But that's where posture is really practical. At the end of the day, it just makes it flow more efficiently, and like you're saying, flowing. Just good, but that's good. For anybody who's listening, who's interested in breathing, the key is just deep and rhythmic. Keep a rhythm, kind of what you're saying. If you have a rhythmic breath, and as deep as you can make it, learn how to belly breathe is the best. So you get the bottom of your lungs are actually hitting new air and releasing the old air. Deep and rhythmic is the essential point. If you can just keep it that way, you'll calm. And the thing, the practical part of breathing, it cleans your blood out. It cleans all that cortisol from your blood, so it gets those stress chemicals gone. That's another reason why you're less reactive. People are reactive to the world because they have built up stress and adrenaline in their bloodstream, cortisol and adrenaline. So that makes you react to the world like you're prey. You know what I mean?
Right.
Reacting to the predator. And that's literal. So when you
Yeah,
breathe deep, oxygen cleans your blood.
Yeah, I've studied a lot of this, Mark. So for the typical animal, when they sense a prey is in the area, they have a stress response, and they go into freeze mode. So it's not just fight or flight; it's freeze, flight, fight mode actually. And in the freeze mode, they freeze up. Their breathing gets shallow because they're trying to hide basically without moving, because the basic math of it all is, if it's a predator, it's bigger, stronger, and faster than me. So my best move is just to freeze and hope not to be seen. And then that's why the hair on your neck stands up, so you freeze, and now you're trying to take in as much information as possible to find out where the predator is, what's going on, does the predator know I'm here? And that's a highly stressful condition to be in. And I think in nature it's probably rare. It doesn't happen that much. But
I never knew that I never knew the freeze. That's interesting to know, because that's my default. The fight or flight is all I heard, but I only fight when I've been punched, and I, rarely, fly when I'm outnumbered. But my default, and I bet you a lot of people may relate to this, is the freeze.
I'm sure that's the default of essentially every animal is to freeze.
Up. Yeah, I just want to clam up. I want to shut up. I want to just go hide in the closet, or I want to sleep. I want to take a nap. And that's how I process stuff. But it's really just emotional freezing, and you got to keep moving. That's how I try to change my patterning. I try to go for a run now. I try to, do my stretching, whatever, walk for an hour. But to keep moving, I find I'll work my problems will sort of resolve themselves, but I have to keep moving.
That's why
it's really important.
The sort of cliche of somebody pacing back and forth because they're worried about something. What's going on there is the body is trying to break out of the freeze and is trying to simulate the flight mode. And it's trying to burn off that stress response. That's what it's trying to do. So it makes perfect sense to go out for a run is going to turn off your stress response and turn on your relaxation response. It's just going to tell your nervous system, we've gone through the cycle, we've escaped, and we're free from the predator now. Now we can relax.
Yeah. And it's amazing if I get past, 30, 40 minutes of a nice walk, the solution usually comes to the forefront of my mind. That's just how the body works. If you hold a thought and it's a meditation, you hold something in your mind and you consciously just say, I'm going to solve this problem. And you will,
I got to do more of that walking. I mean, I've heard so many people say that it's a great place to contemplate, to create, to think, as you say, when you're just out there walking, your body's moving rhythmically.
And I read, you're more in the city, but I saw this interesting article by a London physiotherapist, sociologist, who got into walking through London, and he wired himself up, blah 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 blah. And he found, because he just says walking's the greatest, and people are like, how can you walk around London? It's such a crazy, big, bustling city that you're insane. You're going to just be stressed out. He goes, no, he said, what I've discovered is, from my testing and research and blah, 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 is you actually open up your brain more when you walk through a city environment. If you walk steady and you walk for at least an hour, he said, because all those little, what you would think are as obstacles of the traffic and the people and the noises actually open up your brain, because your brain is now ready for any possibility. You become like more of a animal in a jungle, but heightened.
Oh, I see.
And
it's like a simple sport in a way, like you're getting into a little bit of a flow state.
Yeah, you get into a flow state because you become hyper in the moment, ready for any possibility, but it actually opens up all the centers of your brain for your own conscious mind to process. So if you do it and you just keep doing, stopping at the lights, running across, whatever, being ready for a car to jerk out in front of you, someone to cut you off walking, if you just can handle that stuff with the Balaam, your brain just keeps opening and opening, where you can actually really reach high alpha state. And you know what I mean? And you can still solve your problems. You can still get really high on the endorphins and so on. So it's actually working for you, that environment. And I thought it was fascinating. So it gave me more, like I have a neighborhood I live in now where it's more apartment complex, where we used to live in the woods, and I was kind of bummed out. But after reading that, I'm like, oh, shit, I can just walk around here, even though there's people coming home from work and more cars and stuff. And it's fine. It doesn't matter. You can sidestep children in little baby carriages and kids on skateboards, and just know that it's okay. Your brain can handle it. It's actually opening up parts of my brain. It's neat.
Very cool.
Amazing.
So, Mark, we've actually been on for about an hour, so I want to wrap it up. I think I like to sort of give the whole podcast one theme, something that people can take away. And I think what they should go away with today is this idea of having a process for different things in your life. And when you get a frustrating result, meditate on it, contemplate on it, come up with a new action, a new behavior, a change to your process. And don't worry if your process is not perfect. It's going to be an unending, unfolding, always developing process.
Yeah, that's really good. And just, in the words I use as just as a teacher, assess. You're reflecting and assessing yourself, honestly. And then you can move on. You need that reflection, that honest assessment. And that's how you really grow. Keep it growing and evolving. Yeah, it's good.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, brother.
Anytime, pal.
Okay.
World champ.
And thank you to everybody for listening. Please tell your friends about the podcast. Please share it, rate it, and review it. I think we got a number of awesome 5-star reviews. If you could give another one, I would be really appreciative of it. And if you can just share it on social media and tell people about it, would be great as well. And thank you, Dimitri. Okay, folks, we'll see you next week.